Girl refuses to leave school with dad. Teacher's concealed camera uncovers difficult explanation. She watched the students leave the school from the window of her classroom. Another stormy evening was predicted by the darkening clouds above. Throughout the week, she watched her closely, worried about what she suspected was going on. In hopes of being wrong, she squeezed the tiny device in her hand. Her discovery, however, would have her calling the authorities. It wasn't the first time Mrs. Emily Bray had experienced such a nightmare as a teacher. A shiver swept through her, prompted by the memory of the last time she saw him. In the unsavory memory, blue and red lights blink while sirens blare as a man in cuffs curses everyone. As a result, she vowed never to let something like that happen again. Having made a promise, she wasn't planning to break it. However, Emily's life was not always so challenging. She had grown up in California and moved to Washington to begin a new life. With a music teaching degree in hand, she quickly found a high school where she could mentor and guide children who wished to pursue musical careers. Her expectations were that the road ahead would be easy, but she quickly found out it was not. When the girl walked into Emily's classroom, she was in her 7th year of teaching. Despite the fact that it had been 5 years since the first incident, the music teacher was vigilant. At the age of 15, Alice was a freshman with a lifetime of opportunities before her. However, Emily was unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong from the very start. Every little thing seemed familiar, from Alice sitting by herself during class and during breaks, to how far away her mind always seemed from where she was located. Whenever Emily caught sight of her, her gaze would be fixed on an unseen horizon. With her expertise in children and their behavior, the teacher was quick to recognize that the girl needed assistance. As anyone in Emily's position would do, she took a great deal of interest in Alice's well-being. Emily had seen students withdraw from class before. She knew that it was common, but she found Alice's case to be exceptional. Such cries were never ignored by her, and she would always make an effort to help. In Alice's case, nothing made sense. Music class was a quiet place for Alice. She seldom talked or laughed at her classmates' jokes. Walking in, sitting, listening, playing her instrument, or making a presentation was her usual routine. Following that, she would remain silent. Emily assumed this was part of her nature. She might not have been drawn to music. She decided to ask her fellow instructors how Alice was doing in the other classes. She hoped that she was right and that Alice was having a better time than in the other classes. It was heartbreaking to hear the reports Emily received. She was frequently lost in her thoughts, staring out of the window for longer than usual, according to most of her teachers. It was such a shame since most of them thought she was a gifted student. Some imagined that whatever was going on in her home must have been so horrific that she would not even be able to call for help. According to some teachers, Alice was closed off because of the new school environment. They advised Emily to wait a while before approaching her. In the face of reason, Emily delayed. However, a week after Alice's arrival, she saw something outside the school grounds that caused her to abandon caution. They were experiencing a rainy season, and the tarmac roads and parking lots were saturated with water. There was a constant mass of swirling storm clouds high above the school compound, and the weather was cold and gray. In the late afternoon downpour, Emily wondered what the red van was doing just outside the school compound. At first, she thought it was a student's vehicle, but that didn't make sense since it hadn't been around earlier. Something is wrong. The bell for the final period rang, and students hurried out of class, each eager to rush home and shelter from the rain. But in the corner of her eye, Emily caught Alice, who was still glued to her seat. The girl kept looking outside the window, biting her nails as she mumbled things to herself. Her chest was moving up and down rapidly, her free hand trembling on the desk. Emily turned to her fully, watching with a keenness she'd developed after the last incident. Each teacher had blamed themselves for what occurred then, but none more than her. That boy, after all, had been one of the best in her class. She considered walking to Alice to ask if she was okay but thought otherwise. Such matters were delicate and thus needed a sensitive hand while dealing with them. But despite her judgment, she still approached. Alice didn't even see Emily walk to her desk. She seemed lost in place, her gaze glued to the gloom outside, to that terrible red van that just stood there. "Hi," Emily said softly, and Alice jumped back, a hand against her heart. Sorry, the teacher apologized with a sweet smile. "Are you all right?" Alice stared at her for a while before visibly shaking herself. "Yes," she whispered, seemingly unsure of the answer. "Yes, Mrs. Bray. I'm okay." But although her full attention was on Emily, she kept side-eyeing the van and fidgeting with her fingers. Emily had to stop herself from staring at her too much. She meant to turn away but saw the van's door swing open. A tall man in a worn plaid jacket and cap stepped out of the vehicle. Alice gasped, quickly collecting her books and standing up. She slung her bag over her shoulder and hurried out of class. Emily watched in awe, following Alice as she ran across the hallway and out of the school. Although the teacher couldn't explain what she'd just witnessed, she was sure Alice was in trouble. Emily could tell when someone was fearful. She could see how fast Alice was breathing as she threw her pens and books into her bag. Although it was cold in the classroom, the girl's forehead sheened with sweat. Emily walked to the door, watching the girl share a few words with the man before handing her the school bag. With one last look at Emily, she stepped into the van. Emily couldn't think of anything else when she got home that night. She repeated the events in her mind, considering whether she was reading too much into the whole situation. Why did Alice wait so long before going to the van? The man stepping out of the vehicle made her hurry out. Were they related? The teacher didn't have much to go on. Asking Alice if everything was okay back home would yield little. There was a high chance she would lie because of fear and become even more elusive. Emily couldn't trail her after school. Although noble, her efforts could get the girl into more trouble than she was in already. She decided to watch her closely, hoping she'd pick up on something that would hint at what was happening. Emily was the first faculty member to report to school the following morning. She sat in the staff room, her sight glued to where the van had parked the previous evening. Minutes counted by, and it wasn't long before Alice walked through the school's parking lot, her backpack clutched tightly and her eyes bouncing all over the place. But that wasn't the part that sent a cold shiver down Emily's spine. The red van was back, the tall man in the plaid jacket and cap watching as Alice walked into school. After lingering for a few seconds, he hopped into his vehicle and screeched off. Emily ran out of the staff room, almost colliding with Alice, standing at her locker. The teacher composed herself before greeting Alice. But she noticed streams of tears glistening on the girl's cheeks. "Is everything okay?" the concerned teacher asked. But Alice didn't answer. She was trying to take off her raincoat, her tears falling as she did so. Emily tried reaching out for her, but she squirmed. "I'm all right," she whispered, wiping her tears. Emily stepped closer to her. "Do you need a place to cool off?" she asked. Alice's answer would leave her stunned. Alice looked at Emily with narrowed brows, clearly assessing the validity of her offer. "No," she said as fresh tears grew on her lashes. "I just need a minute, okay?" She was rubbing her left forearm through her sweater's fabric. She kept wincing as if in pain, with more tears streaming down her face. Something sinister was at play here. "Students are starting to come in," Emily said, jetting her chin at the entrance. "You don't want them to see you like this. The staff room is empty. You can hunker down there for as long as you like." When Alice didn't seem moved by the offer, Emily decided to sweeten the pot. "I have a bushel of fresh apples, hot coffee, and some freshly baked cinnamon buns." Alice's eyes widened at the mention of cinnamon buns, and Emily pointed toward the staff room. Alice didn't speak, but how she closed her locker and led the way told Emily all she needed to know. Since most teachers weren't in yet, Emily asked Alice to sit so they could talk about how she was finding the new school. If only she knew what darkness she was about to uncover. Alice's answer was simple. She liked the school and everyone in it, but was still trying to get her bearings around it. But as she talked, Emily couldn't help but notice how quickly she cleared her plate of cinnamon buns. The girl seemed to haven't had food for a while and couldn't eat fast enough. Emily observed with interest, her heart thumping as her fear of something was wrong grew. Alice's sweater, jacket, and knitted hat were dirty up close. Her hair was not as well kempt as it should have been, and her eyes were also tinged red, with heavy bags like she hadn't slept well for a while. She pulled out her phone and asked Emily if she could charge it. She explained that there was a faulty power line at home, and she had difficulty charging her devices. And that's when Emily saw it. When Alice handed over her phone, her left sleeve rode up her arm. Her forearm, which she'd been rubbing earlier, was purple as if bruised. Emily was careful not to fixate on it. She took Alice's phone, hoping this would strengthen their bond. If she suspected Alice was in trouble earlier, she was sure something horrible was happening now. If only she knew what. Emily plugged the phone behind her desk and served Alice another cinnamon bun. Alice quickly pulled her sweater's sleeve over her arm, clearly trying to hide the bruise. Trying to stay composed, Emily didn't ask about the mark. The girl was still too volatile. Emily needed her to trust her first. She started conversing about Alice's past, hoping to pick up on something relevant real soon. She had no clue how deep the rabbit hole went when it came to Alice. There is a reason why most people like to mind their business regarding things that don't concern them. Usually, poking noses where they don't belong lands you in bad situations. But Emily had never been one to see something terrible happen without trying to intervene. Talking to Alice, she started uncovering facts about the girl that would show her how much trouble she was about to land herself into. Emily learned that Alice was from Arizona and had moved to their town with her dad and little sister. She had been among the brightest in a previous school and had even gone to competitions around the state. She talked about her last school as a paradise that had come and gone. Her eyes were sightless, glassy with stemmed tears. It was as if all she had now was pain and suffering. "Tell me about your sister," Emily asked when she learned Alice had a younger sibling. She couldn't stomach the idea of two young girls enduring Alice's dark reality. Whatever was happening at her home needed to stop. "She's 10, Alice answered with a rueful smile. "She takes after my late mom in almost everything, her smile, the way she talks, what she likes. She's Dad's favorite." She rubbed her left forearm again, a bead of a tear rolling down her cheek. Emily continued talking to her. But she couldn't get Alice to reveal why her clothes were dirty, why she seemed starved, sleep-deprived, and why she had bruises on her arm. But through their conversation, Alice mentioned something that piqued Emily's interest. She said it in passing, not knowing that it would be precisely what Emily needed to break this case open. "The man with the red van is my dad," said Alice. But simply bringing him up seemed to cast a dark shadow over the conversation. Class was almost starting, and most teachers reported to the school. They all said hi to Emily and Alice, but didn't linger around more than needed. Although Emily was out of time as Alice was required to head to class, the teacher had enough snippets of who she was as a person to make a quick assumption of what might have been happening. After their talk, Emily walked Alice to class, now thinking about how the girl had quickly cleared her plate of food. She thought about Alice's clothes and how apprehensive she was when talking about her dad. Everything had gone smoothly until Alice mentioned him. It was clear that something was going on, and he was at the center of it. Emily shadowed Alice throughout the day, noticing that although she seemed lost in the crowds of students, she was sharp and witty with her responses and answers. Late afternoon came by quickly, and everyone ran to their respective vehicles to avoid the building rain. But watching from her perch in the staff room, Emily noticed Alice was still in class, waiting for the van to arrive. She hurried to her, asking if she needed a drive home. Alice politely declined, although Emily could tell she didn't want to. "Are you sure you're okay?" she finally asked. The van had suddenly materialized in its usual spot, Alice's father standing outside it with his gaze on the school window. Emily needed to step in now. Alice fumbled for an answer before her gaze shot to her feet. "I'm okay," she said, a lie. Emily's reflexes kicked in. Pretending to be helping Alice out of class, the teacher slipped a tiny recording device into her bag's back pocket. If something malicious happened behind the scenes, this device would bring it to light. She watched as Alice hurried down the hall and into the pouring rain. All she could do now was wait. Alice reported to school early the following day, finding Emily waiting at the entrance. The teacher invited her for some buns and coffee, and Alice accepted. But while she was eating, Emily took the recording device out of her backpack. Stuffing the device into her pocket, she started conversing with Alice, asking about her night. "It was great," Alice said. But although there was still the telltale sadness and fatigue in her voice, her lips curved slightly. "I couldn't wait to get back to school," she added, avoiding Emily's eyes. The teacher's heart swelled at this, but she could admit that she couldn't wait to be alone to play the recording. The day went slower than usual, with teachers and students flocking to Emily's vicinity, asking for help with music-related problems. She could barely get away from the day's chaos to listen to the recording. But now alone in her car, she rolled her windows up, locked the doors, and fished out the recording device. Everything was about to become apparent. The concerned teacher jacked in her earbuds and pressed play. The answers to this terrible mystery presented themselves like a stage curtain being drawn open. "So, how was school today?" a man's voice came from the device. Emily didn't know who it was but theorized it was Alice's dad. She didn't know what she was about to stumble onto. "Great," an enthusiastic Alice answered, closing the van's door. "You sound happy," her dad continued. "Did you finally have a good day at school?" "Yes," said Alice. "My music teacher. She gave me cinnamon buns and hung out with me until classes started. She even charged my phone for me." Emily's heart melted. She had no clue what would have her dial the authorities' number. "I'm sorry we're going through a hard time, honey," Alice's dad said. "It used to be easier with your mom around, but," he trailed off. "I have a few job interviews lined up this week. The first thing we'll do when a paycheck comes is get the power connected, okay?" Emily sat straight as if knowing what was about to follow would shed even more light on this situation. "We'll also go clothes shopping, anything you and your sister want," Alice's dad said. "Just hold on." "And school stuff?" Alice asked. "Books and pens? We need crayons and paints for Macy. I need a few textbooks as well. You need suits, a haircut, and shoes." "We'll get those as well," her dad answered. But what they said next had Alice pressing pause on her phone. "You need to eat too, Dad," she said. "Macy and I can always share what you bring home. It's enough for all of us." "I will," her dad answered. "You say that, then you don't follow through," Alice said. "We can't lose you too. Not when those men are back." "They aren't. We are safe." There was a slight shuffle of clothes, which could only be Alice pulling up her sweater's sleeve. "Then how do you explain this, Dad?" she asked.